completely different point of view. Now the first thing is I'm going to disagree with everybody on the planet Earth and say they teach you that there are 5 lines and 4 spaces. That is just not true. Okay? Technically, that would only give me 9 possible notes. And a human being, an average human being, can sing 8 notes. You can sing an octave. So only having 9 notes to notate doesn't give me much wiggle room. The truth is the staff is made of 5 lines, but 6 spaces. You can't discount the ones on the top and the bottom just because you can't think out of the box. Okay, so here are 5 lines, and they say, look, there's 4 spaces, and that's because they're only looking from here to here. But is this not a space?
Correct.
And is that not a space? And do I put notes there?
Sure.
Well, then there's 6 spaces, folks. You'll not see a single book on the planet Earth that tells you what I'm saying. Now, what I'm saying is reasonable. People out there who want to argue with me and say I'm wrong, and then they hear me and they go, well, you're right, but. You're right, but. There is no right, but. I'm either right or I'm wrong, okay? And if I'm right, then everybody else in the world's wrong, and if everybody in the world's right, then I'm wrong. So I got news for you. I'm right, the whole world's wrong. There are 5 lines and 6 spaces. And we also use a thing called ledger lines. If we need to go beyond the 11 notes, look, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 11 positions. I have 5 lines and 6 spaces that I can draw notes on, so I have 11 notes. Now, since the average person can sing 8 notes, I have more than enough wiggle room to write just about any melody you could sing on this staff. And that's the most important thing about writing music on the staff. The visual is more important than whether I got the name of the notes right. The visual. And trying to put it in a key or in a position where all the notes wind up on the staff so it's easy, aesthetically simple for the eye to see it and read it. Now you look at stuff like flute music, and flute music, they've written out this whole staff, and then they've got 5 dozen little ledger lines above on every freaking note. And a lot of flute music is written, like this. You got, this thing there. And they write out this whole staff, and then all they do is write on these ledger lines. Now, in the 14th century, the guy who did this would have failed his writing class. In the 14th century, when people were a little bit more sensitive to these issues, they would have said, well, look, the whole point of having the staff is to make it easy for people to play. This ain't easy. Because I have to count all these goddamn lines down here and figure out where I really am. And I'm spending all my time going, A, B, C, D, A. Right? And I'll tell you what, here's what piccolo players and flute players do. They memorize the music. No mystery there, right?
Do they mark the paper like crazy?
Yes! And it's interesting. I've seen piccolo players, and they have little ABCs written in front of all these things because they can't count all the ledger lines. And by the way, that's perfectly okay. Anyone that does that, it's cool. It's good to have an A. Okay? Some people refer to it as a crutch and say that you're a cripple and you should be ashamed of yourself. That's ridiculous. Crutch is something you use till you get over it. A crutch is something you use to heal your body, and then you throw the crutch away. If you kept the crutch forever, I would agree. But you use a crutch to heal the body and get it. These mnemonic devices, these things that we're learning about music theory, same thing. They're just little crutches that we use for our convenience, so we can use them to do something, and then when we do the job, we throw it all away. Okay, so good music writing would be put this down here on the staff where it'd be easier to see. That's the first thing. Second thing, we've got 5 lines and 6 spaces, so we can use them. The next thing is, how do they work? Well, here's the way it works. In the Western tradition, the most used scale is called the major scale. And you've heard it as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. That's ancient Italian. And there aren't too many Italians around that can even tell you what that means anymore. I mean, it's so ancient, so archaic a language. But if you go back to the 1st century, you find out that 100 years after Christ, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do meant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was the way people count. And what happened is the Spanish invaded that area of Rome and Italy, and brought the Spanish language, and it changed from do, re, mi, fa, sol to uno, dos, tres, cuatro. So the language for counting changed, and the old do, re, mi got lost. And what happened is a lot of music traditionists tried to keep that alive by bringing the Latin and the ancient Italian and the ancient Greek roots back to music. So they bring all these ancient words with them, which just simply confuses us mere mortals with the language we don't need, that we're going to learn another dead language and learn how to use that dead language and then never use it again. So it's like getting in the computer field, learning a new language, and then 2 years from now you'll never code in that language again. So you've got to learn a new language 2 years from now, then another one. Every 2 years HTML changes. Now there's Java. Java, you know, Basic gave way to C, C gave rise to Fortran, Cobalt gave rise to Fortran, Fortran gave rise to Forth, Forth gave rise, on and on and on and on and on. It never ends, right? But in music, a lot of people bring these traditions back, and they're so busy trying to keep the tradition and hound you into the tradition that what happens is you become a little puppet for their, you know, for their tradition, for their keeping the tradition alive, and you really, it's not useful. What you learned is not applicable to much. Okay? So anytime anyone tries to teach you do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or they try to teach you A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that's okay, go ahead. There's millions of places out there where you can learn that. But underneath it all, they're really just saying the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there are 7 numbers in the major scale that we use. Do is 1, re is 2, mi is 3, etc. So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, if we say the numbers, the interesting thing is after a while your ear will hallucinate the numbers so often, you say them out loud so often in singing songs and playing the scale, that eventually your brain, just like with these code words, puts the symbol and the number together, and one day you're walking down the street thinking of a piece of music, and instead you're thinking of the numbers.
Which is the right brain.
Yeah,
So
right, and it comes all at once. It's not a thing where you've worked it out or you've lifted a lot of weights to get there. I swear to God. It's a thing where you just use the language until you are so familiar with the language and recognize the language so much that one day you're walking down the street and your brain decides to map that whole new section of your brain into the whole system, and all of a sudden, boom, you're hearing the notes as interval numbers. And suddenly, any melody that's played on the radio, or anything that you think of, or you hear someone on the at the bus stop whistling, and all of a sudden, in your head, you're hearing 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 5, 5. Oh! It's a wonderful day. Okay? Now, there's a couple ways of getting to that level. First thing, start with the older scales. The oldest scales on the planet Earth are called pentatonic scales. They're 5-note scales. So mankind learned to develop 5-note scales first and sang these things called the pentatonic scale. And that's what we've been working with for the last 3 workshops, right? We've been singing 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. We've been skipping the number 7 and skipping the number 4. Because those actually came much later. The pentatonic scale was invented by a guy named Pythagoras back in 500 BC, actually 535 to be precise, BC, at exactly the same time that Nebuchadnezzar was having an argument with God. And God got mad at him, and during one of his orgy parties, God's hand came down out of the sky and scratched onto the temple wall, meeny, meeny, tickle, fara, which means, the party's over. And what happened is, Babylon, as a great empire, fell. Nebuchadnezzar died. And the Babylon Empire never became a great empire again. That's what he meant by the party's over. At exactly the moment that that is happening, this guy, Pythagoras, who's a mathematician, is inventing a thing called science. And through science and scientific experimentation, discovers a tuning system and develops a scale called the pentatonic scale. And that scale is so basic to the human consciousness that you find scales like that in every culture around the world. And you can go to the deepest, darkest part of Brazil, you know,
Primordial.
and find primordial, right, people sitting there in their little huts singing tunes, the latest tune in, you know, wherever, and it's pentatonic. It's a 5-note scale. You see Aborigines picking up bugs and playing bugs, and the bugs are producing 5-note scales. It's weird. It turns out that there's a connection between nature and science that produces these numbers. And the most basic one is the pentatonic scale. Now, the pentatonic scale was popular all the way up until about 1000 AD. So we're talking about 1,500 years of tunes written in pentatonic scales. Trust me, there's a lot of them out there. Okay?